He hadn't spoken a word since sunrise, but the letter in his coat pocket whispered louder than any voice dared. The sky was pale and swollen, like it hadn't yet decided whether to snow or hold its silence. Weston Harlow stood at the edge of the post office platform, boots planted firm on the frost-slick boards. His long coat shifted in the cold, and his gloved hand gripped the telegram he hadn't opened for 3 weeks. To be opened in good faith, it said on the outside. But Weston didn't much trust faith anymore. Across the street, a dray horse steamed in the chill. The town was quiet in the way it got just before a storm, folks walking faster, heads low, eyes lower. No one had spoken to him since he rode in that morning, not even the postmaster who slid the bundle across the counter like Weston might catch fire if touched too long. He might have left just then, mounted up and returned to the great lonely stretch of prairie he called home, if not for the tug. Small, firm, right at the edge of his coat hem. Weston looked down, and there she was. A little girl, maybe 5 years old, cheeks red with cold, one mitten hanging from her wrist by a string. Her coat was patched and dusted with snow, her braids crooked, her chin tilted up with the kind of defiance only children or the long-forsaken ever wore without shame. "You look sad, sir," she said plainly. "Wanna meet my mommy?" Weston blinked. Behind them, someone snorted. A woman by the mercantile leaned over and whispered to her friend. They were watching him now. Everyone always watched him, but this was different. He didn't know the girl. Had never seen her before. "Where's your mama?" he asked, voice quiet from disuse. She pointed with her whole arm, past the general store, past the smithy's shed, to a wagon near the livery fence. Its wheels sat crooked in the snow like something had snapped underneath. "She can't come," the girl said. "She's tired." Weston should have left it. That's what the old Weston would have done. Tip his hat, nod once, and ride on. But the child didn't beg, didn't explain. Just looked at him like she already knew he wouldn't refuse. So he didn't. The walk to the wagon was slow. His boots sank into the snowpack. The girl, she said her name was Junie, walked like she wasn't cold. Like cold was a thing she'd gotten used to too young. When they reached the wagon, Weston saw the problem. One axle had cracked clean through, probably from weight or rot or just too many nights on frozen ground. The canvas top was ripped at one corner and mended with an old petticoat. Someone had tried hard to keep it together. Someone who still believed something was worth saving. Junie climbed in like she'd done it 100 times. Weston hesitated at the edge. The inside was dim, smelling of ashes and cedar. And sorrow. She sat there, young, beautiful, hair braided loose over one shoulder, a split at the knee of her skirt showing red, chilled skin. One hand held a mug with steam still rising from it, though barely. She didn't flinch when she saw him. "Ma'am," Weston said. She raised her eyes. They were the kind of eyes that didn't startle. Not anymore. Just settled on his face and stayed there like she was waiting for him to say something that mattered. "I brought your girl back," he murmured, suddenly aware of how rough his voice had gone over the years. The woman nodded. "Thank you." He stood a moment longer, unsure if he was expected to leave. Junie was already curling up beside her mother, pulling a threadbare quilt over them both. "What's your name?" the woman asked softly. "Weston Harlow." Her mouth twitched. Not quite a smile. "That supposed to mean something to me?" "No, ma'am." "Then it don't." She turned her face toward the wagon wall. And that should have been the end of it. But as Weston turned to leave, he noticed the hammer beside her, the small pile of bent nails, and the blood on her knuckles. She was trying to fix it herself. With no man, no tools, and no help. Just bare fingers and grit. That night, he didn't ride home. He tethered his horse at the livery and slept in the stable loft like a man avoiding something he didn't yet understand. Snow fell heavier through the hours. The town slept beneath its weight. And Weston watched the lantern in the wagon burn lower and lower until even its light seemed to surrender. By morning, he'd decided nothing. Only saddled up and rode out the north fence, same as always. But when he reached the edge of town, he stopped. Turned. and went back. He didn't knock. He left firewood stacked by the wagon tongue. Just enough for 2 days. He placed a new wool blanket on top, one stitched by his mother years ago. Then he walked away without a word. He didn't return the next day. But on the third, the girl found him at the blacksmith's. Slipped a note into his coat pocket when he wasn't looking. It wasn't from her mother. Just a small drawing. A man and a girl. And between them, a cabin. He folded it quietly and kept it inside the telegram he still hadn't opened. The town talked, of course. They always did. The rich one's got himself a taste for hardship, someone laughed in the saloon. Taking in strays now, is he? Someone else muttered at the feed store. Weston didn't reply. Didn't need to. Because on the 7th night, when the cold was so bitter it cracked the troughs, he saw smoke rising from the wagon. And in the distance, the sound of a girl's giggle, light, sudden, like bells on a sleigh. She was dancing. Junie. In circles. Spinning in a coat 3 sizes too big, arms raised to catch snow. And her mother? She was leaning against the side of the wagon, watching. Not smiling. But not crying either. Weston tipped his hat. She didn't nod back. But she didn't look away, either. That night, Weston opened the telegram. The paper trembled in his hands. Not from the cold. The message was from a woman he almost married, years back. She'd written, "I still think you're meant to be a father." He folded it, quietly, and tossed it into the fire. Outside, snow kept falling, not like sorrow, but like silence slowly forgiving the ground. And somewhere behind him, a child's voice whispered to her mother, "I think he's going to stay this time." By the second week, the snow had thickened into a hush that blanketed the streets and silenced even the crows. Weston Harlow walked the long way through town, not because it was easier, but because it meant avoiding the widow who ran the general store. She'd taken to watching him with the same look he gave horses with stones in their hooves, suspicion mixed with pity. Lily Mae Rowan, however, never looked at him like that. He saw her most days now, though neither spoke much when they passed. She was always working, sewing by lamplight, mending things that should have been thrown out, digging through half-frozen soil like the earth owed her another shot at spring. Her hands were raw, red, and cracked. She wore no gloves, and never complained. The townsfolk noticed. "She's just here for a new sponsor," someone muttered outside the church. "Watch, he'll marry her before winter breaks. That girl's got tricks in her blood." Weston said nothing. He never did. But one morning, as he passed the wagon with a fresh sack of oats for her borrowed mare, he heard something that stopped him cold. A hammer. Again and again. Then a thud. Then silence. He stepped around the back and saw her on her knees, breath coming short. A nail was bent sideways. Blood dripped from her palm. She didn't see him at first. She just stayed there, frozen in failure, shoulders shaking but her voice silent. He set the oats down gently. Then, without asking, took the hammer from her hand. She looked up, startled, furious, ashamed. Her lips parted, but no words came. "You don't have to prove anything," he said quietly. She flinched as if the kindness stung more than the cold. "I wasn't proving," she said after a long moment. "Just trying." She didn't stop him when he repaired the board. Didn't thank him either. Just watched with that same unreadable calm she always wore, like she'd been burned once and never let the smoke clear. When he finished, he nodded once and turned to leave. But she spoke again. Softly. "I'm not here to make you look good. I didn't think you were. I'm not here to make you feel useful either." He turned back. "Then why are you here?" he asked. A long silence. "Because I ran out of other places," she said, voice quiet but steady. "And I'd rather be cold here than warm where I was." He didn't press. But he didn't walk away this time either. That night, Weston left a tool chest by her wagon. Not a word written on it. Just tools, well kept, oiled, and placed with care. The next morning, it was still there. Untouched. But a loaf of warm cornbread wrapped in linen sat on the fence rail by his horse. They never spoke about the trade. Junie started visiting him more often. Sometimes just to sit on the porch rail of his ranch house and swing her legs. Sometimes to ask questions children shouldn't ask, like, "Did you lose somebody too?" Weston never answered. He built her a small stool for the porch, just her size. She painted a sun on it with the leftover dye from a beets jar. Then asked, without preamble, "You gonna marry my mommy?" He nearly dropped the saddle oil. "I mean," she added, "you come around like you want to." Children had no breaks. Weston looked at her, truly looked at her, hair fraying in the wind, cheeks still pink from cold, eyes too big for her little face. "You think she'd let me?" he asked, half-choked. "She says men always leave." "And what do you say?" Junie shrugged. "I say, I hope this one don't." Weston didn't answer. But he went inside and fixed the loose hinge on his bedroom window that night like someone expecting company someday. A few days later, Lily May came into town, walking slowly, her limp more visible than usual. She didn't hide it anymore, not from him, not from anyone. Weston saw the way people stared, how they turned their backs once she'd passed. At the mercantile, the shopgirl asked if she'd be paying in coin this time or otherwise. Lily May stared her down until the girl flushed and backed off. Weston witnessed the whole thing from the street, fingers clenched around the rail outside the blacksmith's post. He didn't interfere. Not because he didn't want to, but because he knew a woman needed to stand for herself if she was ever going to be allowed to stay standing. That night, Weston rode out with extra feed. Lily was combing Junie's hair beside the campfire when he arrived. Neither looked surprised to see him. "Cabin's too quiet without her," he said. Lily glanced at Junie. "She talks a lot. She asks the right questions." Lily didn't answer. Instead, she said, "You look like a man who needs forgiveness." He blinked. "For what?" She met his gaze evenly. "That's the kind men never say." He sat by the fire, close, but not touching. They listened to the wind for a while. Watched the smoke drift and dissolve. Somewhere far off, a coyote cried. The snow had stopped, but the silence afterward was heavier than the fall itself. "I was 16 when they called me a temptation," Lily said suddenly. "Because a preacher's son followed me around. I said no. They said I asked for it." Weston didn't move. "My daddy sold the wagon to cover hush money. That's the same wagon I live in now." Junie was asleep, curled against her hip. Lily's voice cracked, but she didn't let it fall apart. "I married a man who promised I'd be more than gossip. He turned out worse. Took everything. Died owing more than he ever earned." She looked up, finally. "You still want to feed my horse, Mr. Harlow?" He nodded. Not because he pitied her. Because he saw her. And because somewhere deep inside him, something long buried stirred. When he stood to leave, she reached into her apron and handed him something wrapped in calico. He opened it on the ride home. A single, slightly crooked horseshoe. Handmade. Balanced just enough to hang, just enough to hold luck. He nailed it to the side of his porch. Not the door frame. The porch beam. Like he didn't want anyone to see it but her. By week's end, snow returned, heavier than before. Lily May didn't come to town that week. But Junie did. She arrived on the ranch at dawn, cheeks red and eyes serious. "Mama's out a flower," she said. "And she's tired." He gave her the sack without question. Helped her tie it tight to her sled. As she turned to leave, she stopped. "Mama says I shouldn't talk about things I don't understand." "Then don't," Weston said gently. "But I do understand this," she whispered. "You make her quiet. But not the sad kind. The safe kind." She left him with that. And Weston, for the first time in years, lit a fire he didn't need just so the smoke would rise where she could see it from her wagon. The snow had begun to reseed in ribbons, patches of dirt showing through the white like old bruises finally surfacing. Weston's ranch house sat wide and plain at the edge of the prairie, fronted by a wraparound porch he never used. The wood stayed clean, the chairs untouched. It had been built for guests that never came, laughter that never lingered, and a family that never formed. But now there was a small stool on the corner step, painted with a beet-red sun. And sometimes, a little girl sat on it humming lullabies to herself as if the prairie could hear her. Junie never knocked when she arrived. She'd just show up, hair uncombed, mittens mismatched, swinging her legs and offering up scraps of conversation like they were gifts. One morning, she brought him a blue button in a tin. "It fell off Mama's favorite dress," she said. She cried when it did. "But I kept it." He didn't ask why she gave it to him. He just tied it to a strip of rawhide and nailed it to the beam above the porch like a talisman. Later that week, Lily May came herself. She walked slowly, shoulders tight, skirt hem damp with thawing snow. Her limp had worsened, though she pretended it hadn't. She held a loaf of bread still warm from the Dutch oven, and her hand trembled when she offered it. "I figured I'd repay the flour," she said, not meeting his eyes. "You didn't have to. Which is why I did." She stepped onto the porch. It was the first time she'd stood there. Not near it. Not at the bottom of the steps. On it. He didn't say a word. Just held the door open. But she didn't go inside. "I'm not a charity case," she said. "I never said you were. I don't need you to rescue me. I didn't ask to." She looked at him, hard. Then her shoulders dropped, and she sank onto the porch chair like it might collapse under her weight. "I just needed to sit somewhere not on dirt," she said, voice hoarse. He poured her coffee. They didn't speak for a while after that. But the porch held the silence well. The next day, the town noticed. Mrs. Brixley from the Mercantile crossed to the other side of the street when she saw Weston. Reverend Hale said something in his Sunday sermon about wolves in sheep's clothing and opening your home to the unclean. Lily May never returned to that church again. Word traveled faster than hoofbeats. By midweek, Weston's ranch was the subject of every whispered prayer and sideways glance. "She's using him," they said. "She'll trap him. Girls like her always do." Weston said nothing, but he added a second chair to the porch. Then a third, smaller, just Junie's size. He sanded it by hand. Painted its slats with leftover barn red. Junie gasped when she saw it and hugged him without warning. Her little arms wrapped around his knees like tree roots clinging to the last warm soil. That evening, as dusk settled into pale lavender, Lily stood on the porch and whispered, "You're going to lose everything if you keep doing this." "I've lost worse," he answered. "I don't want your name ruined." "Then give me yours," he said before he could stop himself. She stared at him. Not startled. Not flattered. Just hollowed. "That's not funny," she said, quiet. "It wasn't meant to be." She left before the sky turned fully dark. He stood on that porch a long time after she was gone. By the following week, the trouble arrived with a knock. 3 men stood outside the livery where she'd borrowed space, 2 of them from town, 1 from Dry Hollow downriver. Mr. Jasper Burnham, owner of the wagon lot and 2 boarding rooms. Liked power. Liked taking back what he claimed was owed. They said Lily May had overstayed her welcome. The wagon had been left too long. Rent unpaid. Reputation unredeemable. "You have until Friday," Burnham told her. "Then we tow it to the river." Weston was there. He didn't speak. Just stared. Lily's mouth was set, but her eyes were watery. When they left, she said, "Don't. Don't what? Don't go trying to fix this. I can't owe you more than I already do. You don't owe me anything. You say that, but men always keep tally." He didn't argue. But that night, he cleared out the old hay shed behind his barn. Swept it. Repaired the roof. Built bunks. He didn't invite her. But he left the lantern burning through the night. She didn't come. Not the next day either. But Junie did. She ran up the steps of the porch, breathless. "Mama's crying. She says she's tired. She says this whole place hates her. And I think she wants to leave." Weston knelt in front of her. "Do you want to leave?" Junie's lip trembled. I want her to stay somewhere she don't have to fight. He stood, rode into town, found Burnham sitting fat in the saloon, talking about land and women like they were cattle. Weston laid 5 silver coins on the table. More than what was owed. Burnham blinked. She's not yours, he said. I know, Weston replied. That's why you don't get to keep her. Then he turned and walked out before anyone could answer. The next morning, Lily May stood on the porch again. She didn't look at him, didn't sit, just stared at the horizon like it might give her a reason to run. I'm tired of being watched, she said. Judged. You want to leave? I want somewhere I can breathe. He nodded. Then he pointed to the far end of the porch where the sun struck the rail just so at mid-morning. I built that spot for someone who knows how to stay quiet, who doesn't need to fill silence to matter. She turned to him slowly, and for the first time, her eyes softened without shame. You mean me. I don't mean anyone else. She stepped toward the beam, ran her fingers over the blue button nailed there. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I was going to sew this back on. He didn't move, just said, It looks better here. And for a moment, the world paused, just long enough for her to lean against that beam like it had always been waiting for her. But just as she closed her eyes, a rider appeared at the edge of the horizon. Fast. Urgent. Dust rising from the path behind. Junie ran from the barn yelling, Mama! Someone's coming. Lily May stood upright. Her face went pale. Weston stepped off the porch. The rider dismounted before the horse stopped. It was a deputy, new in town, too clean for this place. I've come for Lily Rowan, he said, voice loud and sure. Lily swallowed. Her fingers clutched the porch rail. On whose orders? Weston asked. The deputy unfolded a letter. Property claim. Child custody request. Mr. Burnham says this woman's unfit and abandoned her land obligations. Lily's knees buckled. Weston caught her elbow. Junie clung to her mother's side, eyes wide. I'm not going, Lily whispered. Then you'll need someone to prove it, the deputy said. Someone willing to stand for you in court. Weston stepped forward. I will. The porch held its breath. And somewhere behind them, a crow flew off the roof, its wings slicing through the wind like something had just broken loose. The morning they came for her, the sky was bright. Too bright. Not the gray hush of snowstorms or the golden hush of hope. Just pale, open, indifferent. As if heaven had turned its face away. Weston was splitting firewood when he heard the hoofbeats. Not fast. Not frantic. But with the kind of rhythm that meant men weren't riding alone. Hoof after hoof after hoof, like nails hammered into a coffin one by one. Junie was feeding the hens. She dropped the pail when the first rider crested the ridge. Lily May stood frozen on the porch, arms crossed tight, apron still dusted with flour. She knew. Before Weston even stepped onto the path, before the riders formed a half moon at the ranch gate, she already knew. Burnham rode at the center. Behind him, 2 deputies, neither from their town, sat tall in the saddle, faces blank with borrowed power. The third man was the one who made Weston's knuckles clench. Reverend Hale. In a dark overcoat, Bible in hand. This wasn't a warning. This was a verdict. You've been warned, Burnham called, reining in. This woman has been in violation of land occupancy, moral decency, and child protection codes for over 3 weeks. Weston didn't move. She's not on your land anymore. She's not your wife either, Burnham snapped. Which means she's no one. And the girl? Illegitimate. Unregistered. Junie stepped behind her mother. Weston looked at Lily. She was shaking, but not from fear. From rage. I was born in this county, she said, voice sharp. That girl's got my name. My blood. My everything. That girl is unfit to be raised by you, Burnham barked. You're a branded woman, Lily May. The town knows it. God knows it. And no patch of porch can change what you are. Reverend Hale nodded, like the word of men could ratify cruelty. Weston stepped off the porch. "Then let's be clear," he said, eyes dark. "You're not taking her." "She's not your wife," Burnham repeated, smug. "No," Weston said, "but she's my guest. And the girl is under my protection. You got a badge, not a right." The deputy raised his voice. "We're authorized to remove the child for relocation. Peacefully if possible. Forcibly if necessary." Junie clung tighter to her mother. Lily reached for Weston's hand, but didn't take it. Just hovered there, as if that single inch of distance still meant something. And then Weston did something no one expected. He stepped in front of her. Not beside. Not near. In front. "If you want her," he said, "you'll have to come through me." Burnham laughed. "This ain't your fight, rich boy. You think money buys you decency? You think one porch and a few loaves of bread make you a hero?" "I don't want to be a hero," Weston said. "Just a man who stayed when others ran." The deputies dismounted, hands on holsters. The wind picked up, not loud, just enough to lift the edge of Lily's apron and scatter snow dust across the porch steps like ash. Junie whispered, "Mama, don't let them take me." Lily looked at Weston, and stepped up beside him. "I said I didn't need rescuing," she said. "I know," he answered. "Then why are you here?" "Because I didn't come to rescue you," he said. "I came to stay." Burnham snarled. "You're making a mistake, boy." Weston took a slow step forward, boots crunching the frost. Then he said it, softly, but like stone. "She's mine now." The words weren't a claim. They were a vow. The deputy hesitated, looked at the Reverend, looked at Burnham, and that's when the town arrived. One by one, silently, townsfolk began appearing at the edge of the lane. On foot, on horseback, arms crossed or hanging still by their sides. Not speaking, just watching. Mrs. Brixley, the stable boy, old Miss Ada from the schoolhouse, even the blacksmith's teenage daughter, holding a shawl over her head and blinking hard. It wasn't a mob. It was a mirror. Of every man who judged. Of every woman who endured. Of every soul who'd ever chosen silence, now standing to see who wouldn't. The Reverend shifted. Burnham's smugness cracked. And Lily May stepped forward, voice clear. "You called me unfit. Said I was ruined." She looked to the crowd now gathering, not to defend her, but to witness her. "I raised my child alone. Cooked on broken stoves. Prayed under torn roofs. Buried a husband who never touched her but beat me bloody. I sewed until my hands bled. And still I'm here." She turned to Weston. "You stayed." Then back to Burnham. "You never even looked." A silence fell like thunder, and from somewhere deep within the crowd, a single voice called out, "Let her be." A woman's voice. Then another, "She's done no harm." The deputies stepped back. Burnham's lip curled, but the fight had drained from him. He spat into the snow. "This isn't the end," he hissed. "No," Weston said. "It's the beginning." Burnham turned and mounted. The others followed. The Reverend rode last, face pale, lips tight. They left in silence. And the townfolk didn't cheer. They just nodded, once, each in turn, then turned away. Because justice, real justice, didn't need noise. It needed presence. Later that night, after the fire had dimmed and Junie was curled under quilts in Weston's bed, Lily stood on the porch looking out into the dark. She wasn't crying. She was remembering. Weston joined her. She didn't flinch when he stood close. Didn't back away. "She's safe," he said. "For now." "For longer," he promised. A silence. Then, "I still don't want to owe you," she said. "You don't." "I still don't want to be rescued." "I know." She turned to him, eyes shining, not with tears, but with the kind of light that only comes from something earned. "I want to build it with you," she said. Not take it from you. Not hide inside it. I wouldn't ask anything less. She took his hand this time. Not hovered. Not halfway. She took it. And above them, nailed to the beam, the blue button twitched in the wind. A storm might come again. The world might turn cruel. But the porch, the one they were never welcome on, had held. And now, it would always be theirs. Which city are you watching our video from? Please leave a comment. Please subscribe to the channel as well. Thank you.